Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee and Football, presented by Rick Vavro and Austin Underground. I'm your host, Blake Monroe, where I'm joined each and every day by Bobby Burton and Jerry Hamilton. Guys, we are 51 days away from kickoff. SEC Media Days, just a few days away. Crazy to think about. By the way, tell us where you're checking in from, what you're drinking, get your questions in, and then obviously tell us your favorite number 51. And I want to get to the SEC here in a minute, but let's start with recruiting, Jerry. I know there's some decisions coming up. What's the latest?
Yeah, I think, we talked about it. Hurricane Burl backed up some announcements. Kelshawn Johnson will be next week at some point in time. That's A&M or Texas. A&M been trending. A&M and Texas battling that one out a little bit. Tanook Hines, the four-star receiver, or on Texas football, four-star receiver out of Duquesne. He announces July 15th. USC, a lot of West Coast connections there. His brother plays at Hawaii. Notre Dame's probably recruited him harder than anybody else, him and his family combined. Texas has been in contact with him plenty here in the last couple of weeks. I still think, as of today, 4 days away, right? USC, Notre Dame kind of put in the longer, consistent effort there. Then Nick Townsend's a big one on July 15th from Duquesne, Bobby. I mean, one of the top tight ends in the country, top 100 kid in the country. Texas has been in a pretty good spot there, fighting off Texas A&M, fighting off USC. I think Alabama is on the peripheral now. They were once in a pretty good spot for him. But that's a big one coming up for Texas. I mean, because there may not be, we talked about it with Lance Jackson at edge and Smith Orogbo when he committed at edge, how many prospects in the country there were that were actually better than him. Nick Townsend at tight end, we feel the same way. Nick Townsend's if he's not the number one tight end, he's a top 3 or 4 tight end. When all the dust settles in this recruiting class come next December, January, when those final rankings are out, I expect Nick Townsend to be one of the top 2-3 tight end prospects in the country. So that's a big one for the Horns. And we'll see. We're monitoring some other guys. Nathan Tillman, what's he do? Jonathan Cunningham announces tomorrow out of North Crowley on Texas, 4-star linebacker out of North Crowley. Texas, Utah, TCU, final 3. Same with a Nathan Tillman, safety out of Mansfield, Timberview. So Texas monitoring some of these recruitments. We're going to have a lot of guys announced coming up here, I believe, in the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days. But then we'll get into some of those guys that are going to have more of the late July and then August announcements.
I'm ready for it, Jerry. Kelshawn Johnson, Nick Townsend, those are the two that I'm really looking forward to. Although you never know with Jonathan Cunningham, Nathan Tillman as well, DJ Sanders. A lot of balls in the air right now. That's common for colleges at this time of the year, where they're trying to figure out where their class starts and ends, et cetera. At least with Texas, where it really begins. Going into the month of July or mid-July into the regular season as well.
Okay, I forgot I was muted for a second. Hey, guys, we got some updated Heisman odds that I want to talk about. And so I'm going to bring that up here. And Dylan Gabriel and Carson Beck, both plus 800. Quinn Ewers follows them with plus 950. Will Howard from Ohio State. Then it's a huge jump to Will Howard and Jalen Milroe at Alabama, followed by Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. And that rounds out your top 6. But anything catch your eye there?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dylan Gabriel that high is interesting. Are we just going to, I don't know. I would not label him the favorite going into that. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
I would put Carson Beck as the odds-on favorite. The problem I have with Will Howard at Ohio State is, A, he's not that good, and B, the best players on that team on offense are going to be the running backs.
Yeah.
So how's he going to get the numbers? Now, he may lead Ohio State deep into the college football playoffs. Jalen Milroe, interestingly, again, I think that they've got better running backs than they have wide receivers at Alabama this year. So how's he going to get his numbers? Jackson Dart's been a name that we've followed a lot. Garrett Nussmeier in that conversation, Jerry, is a little interesting after he's taking over, obviously, for Jaden Daniels. But also, Jerry, I would add this, and Blake, he's brand new. I mean, and he's lost 2 first-round draft picks at receiver. It's interesting. I just don't know that I agree with it. Cam Ward and Riley Leonard would be decent bets, in my opinion, as would Shedeur Sanders, just because they have big names and they Ward and Leonard play for big-time programs. Shedeur Sanders has a big name right now. Those are the 3. If I'm there looking at, if I'm trying to take the field a little bit, those are the 3 in the field.
Look, the Carson Beck is going to be interesting because they start the season with Clemson, neutral site game, right? Big stage right out of the gate. One thing I think we're going to find out about Carson Beck is the Georgia offensive line is going to keep him pretty clean this year. And they may be better. I was talking to somebody yesterday. There's a feeling in Athens their skill may be the best they've had so far in the Kirby era at wide receiver, at running back. That's saying something. So if Carson Beck's offensive line keeps him clean, he's going to have time to throw 2 guys who are seen as better than even what Georgia's had. The other thing there is you have 3 road games. You have big performances in road games. You're at Ole Miss, you're at Bama, you're at Texas. Those are 3 big road games where if you go play really well on the road and lead your team to a victory, that's going to go a long way. Flip side with Quinn Ewers at Michigan week 2. He has that opportunity similar to Bama last year where if he puts a great game together, then he's going to vault himself way up there as well. And those could be the 2 guys being talked about the most early on in the season. And then you have the Oklahoma game. Then you have Georgia obviously at home. Then you have A&M to end it if you're right there in it at the end of the regular season. So schedule set up for those 2 guys really well. Not that Jackson Dart doesn't play really good teams. Not that Jalen Milroe. The interesting thing there is Carson Beck and Quinn go against each other. Carson Beck and Dart go against each other. Carson Beck and Milroe go against each other this year in games. So there's going to be a lot of head-to-head amongst those favorites in the SEC at quarterback this year. Head-to-head ball games that are going to matter in the SEC. And that will factor into the Heisman race, in my opinion.
Got a couple of questions regarding this. And let's see here. Jay Lee says, Gabriel's a late-round pick no matter how good of a season he has, right?
Maybe. He does not – he's not going to be an early pick, that's for sure. No. He doesn't have the arm strength. I do want to mention – you mentioned all those SEC teams. Jerry, Ohio State and Oregon, Will Howard and Dylan Gabriel match up as well, right? So we'll see how that goes. But I don't see Dylan Gabriel as he just doesn't have the arm strength, and he's not big enough. He's not very big. Now, people could say, oh, well, Kyler Murray's not very big, and he went 1 overall. Those are just 2 categorically different type players. But I don't see Dylan Gabriel as a top 3 or 4 round pick.
All right. Before we move on, we got some more odds to discuss. But first, Bobby, I'm going to let you tell folks out there about Austin Underground.
Yeah, absolutely. Since 2004, Austin Underground has specialized in difficult underground commercial installations. The team's engineering background gives Austin Underground the ability to perform work other firms often consider too risky. Rick Vavro and his team offer an end-to-end client experience, including seamless communication, budgeting, staffing, and top-notch trade partners. And most importantly, they produce solid quality work each and every time. That's Austin Underground. Check them out if you have a difficult underground commercial installation.
There you go. All right, guys. And as I said, we do have some more odds to discuss, some new updated odds here. And the first set is to make the SEC championship game. Just to make the game, not to win it. Georgia and Texas, obviously the hands-on favorites there, followed by Ole Miss, Alabama, LSU, A&M, and Missouri round out your top 7. But, I mean, like as I said, Georgia and Texas are the favorites. Everybody else after that, you're going to win some decent amount of money if you put a bet on any of those schools.
Yeah, I mean, look, Texas and Georgia prohibitive favorites. We'll see how it goes. This is a big one for the Longhorns. Who would you take down the list, Jerry, as a surprise team in the SEC this year? Maybe Missouri, maybe Tennessee. as possibilities? What do you think?
I mean, probably Missouri is an upset pick for me because quarterback, wide receiver, what they have coming back. Tennessee, first-year starting quarterback in Nico, good player, first-year starting quarterback, though. He's going to be game planned against after he gets his feet wet. That may be a bit of a tough ask there for Tennessee. But I guess Missouri, but I really do think the SEC champion will come from the top four. I mean, I just believe that. Look, if Georgia, we talked about this before, Georgia goes out and wins at Ole Miss, at Alabama, and at Texas, you just tip your hat and move on, right? I mean, just, all right, y'all are the team. There's no doubt about that. Ole Miss, going to be very interesting because they now have such heightened expectations, probably the highest expectations they have just before Hugh Freeze. They got in trouble there with the NCAA in the Hugh Freeze era. But Alabama is going to be so interesting to me because Kalen DeBoer is going to win. If you don't think he's not going to have a good season, you haven't followed Kalen DeBoer's career. He's going to win. But what's going to be interesting about that is what does he do to maximize Jalen Milroe? Because it's going to have to be done totally different than what he did with Michael Penix and what he ideally wants to do within his scheme. So Alabama is very interesting to me because he has to put Jalen Milroe in the best position to be successful. And him doing that means he's going to have to deviate a lot from his offensive scheme, ideally. Now, can he do it? Yes. Tremendous football coach, but it's going to be interesting to see how much different Alabama's offense looks this year from a schematic standpoint than it did last year at Washington to maximize Jalen Milroe. That's going to be what I'm going to be interested to watch because I think that is going to go how much of a jump does Jalen Milroe make from year one starter to year two starter? I think it's going to be huge under Kalen DeBoer for Alabama's chances. Georgia, Texas. Georgia offensive line is going to be dominant. I think they have 6-7 future pros on the offensive line. If Texas offensive line plays up to its capabilities this year, which means Cam Williams has to come through as a first-year starter, I think their offensive lines could be the difference for those two teams this year. I really believe that because you're going to have to – I think I'm comfortable saying Georgia's offensive line is going to be pretty dominant. The Texas right side can pass pro. If they show well against Michigan, if they're at the level you need them to be, then Texas is going to have a really good year as well. But I think Georgia, being the prohibitive favorite, is correct right now.
I'm just looking at it. I'm looking at the strengths of each of these teams. And as we think about them, Georgia, I think you're right. I think it's the offensive line and the quarterback returning.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're talented on defense.
Maybe not what they were in the two title teams, but talented enough.
Good enough. I mean, come on. I mean, their offensive line's legit. Their quarterback's legit. They're a talented team. Their run game's going to be good. Texas' strength right now, you would have to say offense. They've also got a good offensive line. You've got to say the quarterback's in his third year. Ole Miss, a little bit different. They've got more proven wide receivers than Texas at this point, believe it or not. Maybe even a higher octane offense. Is their quarterback is good? Good question. But this is the first time Ole Miss, to my knowledge, has returned a quarterback and been in the top 10 a year ago. So, in other words, they're a top 10 team from a year ago, and they returned their quarterback. I think that's the first time that's happened in 50 years. So, consider that. Alabama, I think their run game is going to be good, and they're going to be talented on defense. LSU, what is LSU's strength this year, Jerry? That's one that
offensive line.
You think so? That's the big piece because they were not good on defense again last year. They changed defense coordinators, took Blake Baker away from Missouri to change their defense up. They lose Jaden Daniels. They lose 2 first-round picks at receiver. If it's offensive line, okay, I get it. Let's see where it all ends up. Texas A&M, what's their strength? This all-around talent, maybe? Elko on defense is going to
be their first 22 is really good. They got to stay healthy. And their offensive line's got to take a major step. Major.
Let's get going. Missouri, it's their quarterback receiver tandem, Brady Cook and Luther Burden. Tennessee, I mean, James Pierce, the defensive end, are they going to be better on defense, that much better, and functional on offense? I don't know. My take on it is that the lower you get, like, what's Oklahoma's strength in your opinion next year? Is it their
wide receiver, and maybe they're 77th ranked defense last year in the college football. They're going to improve on that in year 3 under Brent Venables. Are they where they want to be? No, but they're not going to be 77th ranked defense. They're going to make improvements there. How much of an improvement is going to be huge, because Jackson Arnold, first-year starting quarterback, really good wide receivers around him. I think Nick Anderson may be a first-round pick. He was out of Katy High, was a very underrated, under-recruited player. Offensive line, you just don't know. I mean, they got good guys out of the portal, but how are they going to come together? Missouri may have the best schedule of all. Somebody mentioned this in the chat. Missouri may have the most favorable schedule of any of these teams this year. I mean, if you look at their schedule, they have to navigate at A&M October 5th, but then they have Auburn at home. They're at Alabama on the 26th, but they have Oklahoma at home, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, and Arkansas at home. That's a really, really good schedule with an experienced quarterback back and really good wide receivers, really good on offense. That's a really manageable schedule for Missouri.
Yeah, I'm just looking at what teams have strengths that could put them in the conversational topic, be, among the top 2 at the end of the year. I will say this. This list officially puts Oklahoma 9th in the SEC. Welcome to the SEC. I can guarantee you what they just finished in Vegas at the Big 12 Media Days, Oklahoma wouldn't have been voted 9th in the conference. So probably would have been 2nd or 3rd in that conference.
Curious to get y'all's thoughts on Cisco's comment. He says A&M is too high. You think they're too high, or where they need to be, or too low?
Well, I'm with Jerry. If they stay healthy, I don't think they're too high. If they stay healthy.
Right.
That's a big if, because the quarterback, it starts with the quarterback, and their offensive line is paper thin. And those are two places. Now, I think they have backup quarterbacks that are capable, but I don't know if they have backup quarterbacks that can withstand the whole issue of the playing in the SEC every week. I would also add this. They are going to be good on defense because Mike Elko is a good defensive coach. Usually it takes 2 years for a system to really start humming on defense, even with good players. So I think they're going to be they're not going to be suffocating on D, even though I think that's where the lion's share of their talent is right now.
And then we're going to switch over. So obviously, as I said, those are to make the SEC championship. Now, this is the odds to win the SEC championship. Georgia and Texas, once again, your favorites. Ole Miss,
by a considerable margin.
Yeah, definitely. So Georgia plus 200, Texas plus 320, followed by Ole Miss is the next closest at plus 600, Alabama plus 800, LSU plus 1,000, Tennessee plus 1,400, Missouri as well at 1,400, and then Texas A&M at plus 1,500.
Again, the thing I look at is if Georgia's going to navigate their way and get there, which they're the favorite and should be, Texas, Ole Miss, and Alabama, the next 3 teams are all on the road for them. They have a really tough road schedule. So they'll, as good as Georgia is, I still expect them to drop a road game to one of those 3 teams. If they go undefeated on their schedule, just forget about it, right? But they can drop one of those road games, obviously still make the SEC championship game. But that's just crazy to see that they play Texas, Ole Miss, and Alabama on the road, and they're that much of a favorite. That tells you how good people think Georgia's actually going to be this year. Because if I told you a team had road games at Texas, Ole Miss, and Alabama this year, you'd say, man, they're probably going to drop a couple of those games. But that tells you how good people think Georgia's actually going to be this year.
Hey, one thing
why is LSU ranked so high? They lost a Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback and 2 first-round picks. Yeah. How are they 5th in the SEC? I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't get.
It's not like they killed it last year. What was their final record? I mean, Are they going to be? They think they're going to be better this year?
They lost a Heisman Trophy winner, 2 first-rounders, would have been at wide receiver, would have been another guy. Their offensive line has possibly 2 projected first-rounders, really good up front. Defensive line, they lost a lot. They're not going to be as good up front as they were last year.
But that's what I'm saying. So how are they fit? Didn't they finish 5th in the SEC last year?
Yeah, that kind of. I don't agree with that one.
Right.
I would have Missouri over LSU.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that A&M has the 6th best odds to get into the game, but the 8th best odds to win the game.
That's just an anomaly, I think. Statistical anomaly. That means they'd have to beat Georgia, I guess. I don't know, or Texas. What if they played Texas back to back?
That'd
That
be
would be something else now. You think we could sustain that back-to-back weeks, Texas versus Texas A&M? It's possible nowadays.
Here's something Steven Henderson says, which is interesting. Brian Kelly record at schools year 3 is really good. That is true. And LSU still does have talent. It's just going to be I think they're going to have to navigate the early part of this. I think they'll be a lot better last half of the year than first half of the year. Breaking in new starting quarterback. I know he's got a little experience. New starting quarterback, lost all those wide receivers, new defensive coordinator, new offensive coordinator. There's a lot of change there for LSU. If they can navigate their way through the first half of the schedule, I think they'll be a lot better team second half of the year, assuming they stay healthy.
Man, I just don't see it with him. But maybe I'm wrong. We'll get Shay Dixon or somebody on here to talk a little LSU football if we can.
Okay, one other thing before we get to questions, fellas, if I can find it here. And so I actually saw this on social media yesterday, and I thought it was pretty interesting. This takes the winning percentages from football, basketball, women's basketball, baseball, and softball over the past 3 years, combines them for a winning percentage average, and Texas number 3 on that list, Tennessee number 1, Oklahoma number 2, Alabama number 4, and UCLA, surprising to me, number 5 there. That rounds out your top 5, but 4 of the top 5 SEC schools.
What were the sports again, Blake?
You got football, basketball, women's basketball, baseball, and softball.
Football. So Oklahoma's got the dynasty in softball. Makes sense. Texas, Mike White has done very well softball wise. That makes sense.
Last 3 years.
Last 3 years.
Okay.
Texas had an Elite 8 appearance in basketball. Has been in the tournament every year. Okay. Rick Barnes obviously done good things at Tennessee on the basketball front. Women's basketball for Tennessee's maybe not what it was, right? Hard to be with South Carolina and Kim Mulkey at LSU, but still a winner. So it kind of falls in place for me if you look at those sports that were included. Again, I mean, you look at Iowa 11th, probably who would have guessed that? Well, they did have Caitlin Clark, and Kirk Ferentz continues to kind of maximize a program, right? And they've been okay in basketball. But that's a really interesting look at it. LSU obviously hurt by all the basketball sanctions, all the things they've gone through from a basketball standpoint.
I just don't. I mean, why do you pick softball? No offense, over I don't know, volleyball.
Yeah.
If that were the case, Oklahoma would probably be 5th or 6th in this. I mean, I'm not, but you know, whatever. I don't look. The revenue sports in college football is football. It is a little bit of basketball and very rarely anything in baseball. So to combine certain sports like that, this doesn't make much sense to me. But okay, I get it. It's not surprising though that Texas and Tennessee are the top 2 or 3 each and every year in the Directors Cup right now. I mean, Tennessee, I think, finished 3rd to Stanford. What is interesting is Stanford doesn't even appear on this list.
Right.
Yet they are in the Directors Cup finals every year. So maybe that puts Stanford on notice in major sports. I don't know.
I was trying to see where they are because I actually have the top 70. And I'm not even seeing them on that. By the way,
their basketball team's been bad. Their football team's been bad. You got a coach fired. Baseball would be holding them up. Softball's been decent. Women's basketball, their head coach just retired as a Hall of Famer. But men's football and men's basketball, not good for Stanford the last 5 years, relatively speaking.
And A&M 34, Texas Tech 46, TCU 50. Oh, and Baylor. Almost forgot the other in-state school, number 28. So basketball really helping them out for sure on that one. But okay, well, let's get to some questions here. Plenty of time to get your questions in, so please do so. And I wanted to ask this one to you guys. E. Kim says, good morning from Rockford, Illinois. What type of stats does Jaden Blue need to enter the NFL draft after this season?
I think more than stats for him, it's, not that he's not. It's just going to be the first time that he's been asked to be durable in the college Power 4 level. He hasn't had more than maybe 10, 12 touches, 13 max in a game to this point in his college career. That's going to be the first big piece for him this year, is when you start touching the ball 15, 18 times a game, obviously making it through that season, being durable, proving that you're that guy from a physical standpoint, durability standpoint. Look, with his skill set, the more plays he makes in the passing game, I think the better for him. Because if you look at, to me, it's not so much production for him. He's going to be productive with 15 to 18 touches a game. As will Cedric Baxter. Those guys are going to be productive guys. The question is, where would you fall in a deep running back draft? Last year's running back draft was not deep at all. Obviously, Jonathan Brooks is a tremendous player, but a guy that tears his ACL goes that high in the draft. This year's running back draft, I'm just going to read some names because it's a deep running back draft at a time where running backs aren't drafted as high. Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins at Ohio State. Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State. Amarian Hampton, UNC. Taj Brooks, Texas Tech. Austin Janty from Boise State's in some first-round mocks. Donovan Edwards, Michigan. Travis Etienne's really good at Georgia, the Florida transfer. Jaden Ott at Cal. A lot of people don't know him. Really good player. Penn State has two guys that are going to be draft picks. So this is a deep running back draft in 2025. So to me, it's how are you different than those other guys, Bobby?
And he is different.
Yeah, because these are more traditional backs. A lot of the guys.
He's more of a receiver, outside guy. Jaden's got the speed. You said durability, Jerry. When someone asked that question, what's it going to take? And I agree with you. It's not anything that he has to do per se. He just needs to be himself, first of all, because he's a big play waiting to happen. So not unlike Keelan Robinson in some ways, but he's a more natural runner, I think, than Keelan. But I wrote touches, which is a sign of durability, right? And I circled 150 touches. He gets 150 touches, is productive with them. That'll be enough for him to show his stuff. 150 to 175 is my guess.
And before we move on to some more questions, fellas, I need to tell everybody out there about our sponsor, Chubbies. They're a staple in my household. Between me and my sons, we love them. We love their looks. We love how stylish they are. Chubbies has crafted the most comfortable clothing with the most unique designs ever. For a limited time, they're giving our listeners 20% off your order with our exclusive code. All you have to do is use promo code ONTexas at chubbyshorts.com. When it comes to true style and comfort in the form of men's shorts, you literally cannot do better than Chubby's iconic original stretch shorts. They're available in 4-inch, 5.5-inch, and 7-inch inseam lengths, depending on how much of your beautiful thighs that you're trying to show off. They put Chubby's on the map for a reason. Of course, you can pair the original stretch shorts with Chubby's lineup of Friday shirts, and now you're cooking with all gas and no brakes. So head on over to chubbyshorts.com, use promo code ONTexas. They're going to give you 20% off. You can't beat that. Don't just blend in with the crowd, stand out with Chubbies. And when my kid heard that they were a sponsor, he said, hey, we can get more shorts now. You got the promo code for 20% off. And I'm sure we'll be doing more school clothes shopping online. So there you go.
By the way, this is always a popular topic right now heading into the season. Please discuss. I'd rather beat Oklahoma and A&M and drop the game against Georgia this season.
Yes. I mean, that to me, that's just like a no-brainer.
Yes.
I mean, I can't even fathom not saying yes to that.
Yeah, no question.
If you told me that were the case right now, I would say yes, I'll take it and sign me up. I think 99%, 95% of Texas fans would. Now, some would get greedy and want all three, and I understand that. Okay, but 95% of Texas fans would take an OU and A&M win right now and a loss to Georgia and call it a day. At least this Texas fan would.
Yeah. Hey, Living Rent Free has a recruiting question I want to answer here.
Go ahead.
Why is offensive tackle Draymond Odoms committed to SMU, edge Cameron Morgan from South Oak Cliff committed to Baylor, and Micah Strickland, corner from Brownsburg, committed to TCU? Not on the Texas big board. They seem under-recruited at this point. Those are guys Texas evaluated. I think a lot of schools like Draymond Odoms, deep year offensive line in the state of Texas, and some other guys kind of moved ahead of him. I think his name was there when he was younger because of that size, that frame. But I think in the last year, some guys moved ahead of him on a lot of boards, not just Texas board, obviously. Cameron Morgan was an interesting when he was at Red Oak, transferred back to South Oak Cliff where he began, or where he was supposed to go coming out, heading into high school. Interesting, a lot of the same thing. I mean, very good player. Baylor got a player that will be a multiple year starter for them if he signs with them. Guy that maybe just, as this evaluation process moved along, a Smith Orogbo pops up and he becomes higher on the board for Texas and Oklahoma and some other people. So just kind of Micah Strickland, really good prospect out of Brownsboro. I think TCU, obviously, they got G. Kyle Baker out of there last year, who I think will be a tremendous wide receiver at TCU. Micah Strickland, very good out of that smaller East Texas town. But Texas evaluated all those guys. They just had guys higher on the board at the end of the day.
And while we're on recruiting, we have a super chat here from Slick Rick that I want to ask you about, Jerry. He said, and thank you, Slick Rick. He said, safe to say French is committing or is a silent, especially with Jackson's ties to the Jaguars. Corey and Moore didn't have interview coverages on this level. Jamie French is an extremely impressive kid. I've done 2 video interviews on Texas football with him now. Extremely impressive every time you're around him. He just seems to get it. He's built for one. It's real. That's who he is. But he's built for NIL too. By the way, he's one of those guys that's built for the modern day of college football. Just an engaging personality, great kid, intelligent. He's really a thinker. I think he's not out there. Look, NIL is going to come his way because of who he is, but he's not out there chasing that singularly or anything. We talked about this last night on live stream. He's looking for a school that fits him, and the rest of it will fall into place. And I think Texas is in a good spot for him. He will likely make that official visit to Georgia in late July. That August 30th decision date will stick. That's his mom's birthday, big day. They're planning a big celebration there around his commitment at Mandarin High School. Obviously, Georgia will put their best foot forward there, but I think Texas is in a pretty good spot right now. We'll see how it turns out. And then we have a follow-up question regarding that from Jason Washington. And Jason says, from a comparison standpoint, what do you think the biggest difference or comparison of Jamie French is versus DeCorian Moore? I'm optimistic if we grab French, he'll be just as dynamic as we think DeCorian would have been.
Speed, right, Jerry?
Yeah. I mean, look, so Jamie French here's what you love about Jamie French. Big catch radius, catches the ball, hands, arms extended, really natural pass catcher. Not close to being a finished product, though. He's got a ways to go both physically. I think he's a kid that will get a little faster. Not that he's slow, but he'll continue to get faster as he gets in the college and puts more strength on that frame. He's getting bigger fast now. I mean, he's closing in on 185, 187 pounds. He turns 18 either yesterday or today. Happy birthday to Jamie French. But you look, I think he's one of those prospects from the state of Florida that will get faster as he gets in that weight program and strength and conditioning programming in college football, because the setup in Florida is just not the same as it is at Texas or a Georgia and some other states. But I think he's a ball winner. I think he's similar to A.D. Mitchell from a skill set standpoint. And I've said that before. That's who I think he's similar to. Does that mean he's going to be a second-round pick? That's up to him and how things kind of play out the next 3-4 years. But he's that level player, prospect. So how that all finishes up. Corey Moore's just a super freak athletically. I mean, it is what it is. Super freak athletically.
And then we have a super chat here from Jerry's Jack Links. Jerry's Jack Links. He says, "This is the Corey and Moore on Jerry Jack Links YouTube account. I'm being held hostage by Phil Knight's checkbook. This is a cry for help. Flip me."
That's pretty funny.
What is the line that Texas would need to use there? The offensive style, you know who your coach is going to be next year on offense. I mean, that's what is kind of cracking me up right now a little bit about this Oregon run. Yeah, it has to do with Uncle Phil's checkbook. There's no doubt about it. But they have 4 wide receivers committed, all elite prospects. Top 2 wide receiver prospects in the country committed to them right now. What are the odds they're even going to have the same offensive coordinator next year? Like, I'm trying to tell you, I think it's below 50-50 that Will Stein, their offensive coordinator, is even back next year. So what does that – I mean, what's the pitch if you're Steve Sarkisian? It's like, look, you're putting you may be making X more in year 1, but you're not putting, the big money, the truly big money in your view the way that you should, because at 3 years here, you go pro, you're talking about multiple millions of dollars and a multiple as opposed to a little bit of money early. I know, I get it. It's a hard sell for Texas and whoever else, but I would sell against Will Stein going somewhere else, because he's not going to be there this time next year. And you will be true. The problem with it is, will Will Stein take a job elsewhere before that first signing day in December 4th? And that's unlikely. And so Oregon's got it timed up pretty good. But that's what I would be selling if I were Texas or anybody else recruiting against Oregon, particularly on offense. On defense, it's different because Lanning's a defensive coach.
And we got some more super chats here to knock out. This first one from Derek Weisner. And Derek says, "Good morning. How much pressure is on Sark to have a successful first year in the SEC, especially with all the positive publicity?"
I think it's pretty high. I mean, I think that, there's a thought here that Texas needs to build on what it did a year ago and not revert, right? Texas doesn't want to see 8-5, right? They want to see more 10-win plus seasons. That will prove that it wasn't a one-year wonder or a fluke, so to speak. So I think that Sark privately has some, I mean, it's not publicly. I mean, nobody's saying, "Oh, Sark's on the hot seat." You don't read that anywhere in media today because it's not a trendy topic. But I think that, Texas is one of those rare situations where you're on the hot seat regardless. I mean, it's just one of those fishbowl environments. I do think that Sark needs to prove that he can be consistent at an elite level. And that is it. Now, is 9 wins and going to the college football playoff consistently elite? Yeah, it is. Is 9 wins and not going to the college football playoff consistently elite? 10 is the magic number for me, because he gets 10 wins, he's in the college football playoff. Even if he's 10-3, by the way, and loses to Georgia twice in the SEC championship. 10 wins is the number.
And look, I think there's we have Smooth is in here in our chat, Alabama fan. Thank you to all those guys who tune in. We'll talk about anything here. I think there's a lot of pressure on Sark and Kalen DeBoer from an expectation standpoint this year. Both those guys have. There's the hot seat conversation, the Billy Napier, the Sam Pittman conversation. Then there's the guys that have a lot of expectations placed on them. And I think Steve Sarkisian. And I think Kalen DeBoer, Sark first year in the SEC, Kalen DeBoer obviously taking over at Alabama for Nick Saban. Those two guys are going to be under a different microscope than most this year. And now LSU fans, if Brian Kelly goes 8-4, they're going to hate him, right? But that's different. That's a singular fan base. But I'm just saying in general, those two, Sark, Kalen DeBoer, they have a lot of pressure. They were in the playoff last year. DeBoer in the national championship game coming to Alabama. Sark at Texas, first year in the SEC. Texas on the way back up. There's a lot of expectations on those two guys. So not, to your point, Bobby, 9-3 at Alabama and not in the playoff, those fans aren't going to be happy with what they had the last 16 years. Sark 9-3, not in the playoff. Texas fans will say, both fan bases say we've underachieved this year. But that's what you get into when you're the head coaches at these two universities.
I think it's interesting. Is Kalen, the original question, is Kalen DeBoer a better coach than Sark, et cetera? Maybe. He's beaten him 2 years in a row. I would like to say this, though. The NFL draft, they didn't beat them on defense, by the way. Washington had an elite offense that included the number 8 pick in the draft at quarterback, 3 wide receivers, I think 3 went before A.D. Mitchell went in the second round or something like that, 2 offensive tackles. We'll see if Kalen DeBoer is as good a coach when he has similar talent. Okay. Alabama is going to have great talent. Don't get me wrong, compared to most teams. But let's see what he does when maybe his quarterback, can't, dot an I from 30 yards away.
Yeah.
And I have confidence in Kalen DeBoer, actually. I will say that. I think he's an extremely good coach. You look at his record wherever he's been, he's always been a winner. But, it's a new challenge for him. You don't know. Everybody, we would love to say, you know what, Steve Sarkisian's better or Kalen DeBoer is better and just throw it away. These are unique challenges for both coaches in that it's both their first chance in the SEC. Now, both teams look like they're loaded and have the talent. I guess we'll see who is the better coach maybe this year at some level.
And then our next super chat, fellas, comes from Mike Gosnell. Thank you, Mike. He says, do you guys see a schedule in the future that has former Big 12 schools on it, or do you think that ship has sailed?
Not in the state of Texas.
Yeah, I could see Arizona State, BYU. Texas has scheduled BYU off and on multiple times through the decades. But not to Jerry's point, right away, TCU. Yeah, I don't see that. Texas will go schedule UTSA, maybe SMU, maybe Rice, that sort of school.
And I believe we have a few more super chats. Jerry's Jack Links, once again, thank you. He says, jokes aside, can you imagine French, Wingo, Cook all on the field at the same time? Would Cook still be at Texas by then, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think this is a big year for Jonte Cook if you want to be a 3-year player in college. This is a really big year for him. He needs to put 35, 40 for 500, 550 on the board this year to set up a junior year, which you could go pro. So it's a big year for Jonte Cook. Now, the question is, and I say this for the receiver core in general, because Sark's going to play more guys. The circle of trust is going to expand. How statistically, what are those guys going to put up this year? Because for A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, they were going to put up really good numbers because they played 3 guys, essentially. Right? So they were going to get a lot of targets, a lot of opportunities. This year, watch, I mean, just remember we said this, Ryan Wingo's last half of the year, he could be the best receiver on this team. Not out of the question last half of the season. So what are all the production numbers going to look like for these guys? DeAndre Moore will play. Jonte Cook will play. Obviously, Isaiah Bond's proven. Silas Bolden's proven. Matthew Golden's proven. Then you have Ryan Wingo coming in as a tremendous 5-star prospect who has already exceeded where Texas thought he'd be at this point. So you have 6 guys. Statistically, I think it may be a little tougher for some of those guys this year, Bobby. So Jonte Cook, if he can have a 35, 40 catch season, if he can navigate through the season, 500 yards, he set himself up to be a 3-year player. Now, if you only have 20, 25 catches for 300 yards, you're not really looking like a 3-year player at that point.
I want to figure out how they're going to handle this, because the bottom line is, who's the better player? Is Jonte Cook better than Isaiah Bond? Is Matthew Golden better than either of those two? How does Silas? We don't know. This is what I would say to y'all as I look at Jonte Cook, and not just versus Ryan Wingo and Jamie Fritsch, but all of them. The problem I have right now is I hear what I hear from behind the scenes. And I've told y'all, I think Ryan Wingo is playing tremendously well right now. Okay. But I don't know who your top 3 or 4 receivers are going to be right now. And so to project Jonte Cook 35 and 550, to Jerry's point, it's very possible. Hell, it could be 60 and 750 if he's the best. But we literally don't know. And Texas fans don't know. And here's another piece. I don't even know that Sark and Chris Jackson know, because they haven't seen them go up against other defenses other than their own. Look, Jonte Cook and Silas Bolden, those guys, they're going to be gamesmen a little bit. They know how to run routes against Manny Muhammad. But how are you going to do it when you face Georgia, where a guy you've never seen before? How's that? I just look at it, and my take on the wide receiver group is, who the hell's going to be the best? I don't know. And I think that we'll see some of that transpire in fall practice. We're already seeing some of it. We've seen some of it in spring practice, and we're hearing about some of it in summertime. But I'm telling you, it's an interesting dynamic right now, because I can't tell you if Isaiah Bond is going to be the best, Jonte Cook's going to be the best. Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
I think this.
Bobby, I do. Ryan Wingo, bus driver here. I think long term, I do think he's the most talented receiver on the Texas roster, and I don't know that it's necessarily close.
Agree. By the way, I think one thing about the receiver position will be so interesting to watch is where it is at the start of the season. I don't think is where it'll be the second half of the season.
I agree.
And I say that because Isaiah Bond, when you go up to Michigan, experience is going to matter. Isaiah Bond played against them last year, been in a lot of big games. Silas Bolden, very experienced player. Matthew Golden, very experienced college player. I think experience matters a lot early in the season, as even Jonte Cook hasn't played a lot of snaps in meaningful games at Texas. DeAndre Moore has not. Ryan Wingo obviously is not. So those guys still have to kind of navigate a little bit early in the season and find their way, because it's still different in the games on Saturday than it is practices or a spring game. So I think what this looks like at the first half of the year could be totally different than what it looks like second half of the year in terms of who's getting the percentage of snaps at the wide receiver position, who's getting the highest percentage of targets. I think it's kind of evolved as the season moves along. We're heading in the last year. You knew Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell were going to be 1-2. You had J.T. Sanders. Then you had Whittington. Then you had the backs out of the backfield. This year, I think it's a little more wide open, and I think the guys are going to have to navigate through it. The second half of the year will look much different than first half of the year, especially the Michigan game, where experience is really going to matter early in the season.
Speaking of experience, Jerry, I know you know all about Manscaped, so tell folks out there about it.
Boy, do I. Sizzle alert this summer. Let the only thing smoking at your barbecue be the grill, not your grooming game. Get ready for the ultimate cookout season with Manscaped. Whether you're flipping burgers or cannonballing into the pool, make sure your meat looks neat with the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. Gotta have the meat looking neat, guys. Fire your grooming routine up and keep it cool with Manscaped. Head to manscaped.com and use code ONTEXAS, all caps, for 20% off plus free shipping. Let's make this summer sizzle for all the right reasons. Look, and after the 5.0 did its job, Whacker 2.0. Keep your ears and nose as tidy as your hedges next door and use our Weed Whacker 2.0. Ear and nose hair trimmer, pesky hair be gone. Perfect for impressing guests at the summer workout. Guys, the last thing you want to happen is your significant other give you a kiss on the ear and come up pulling hair out of their teeth. Don't let that happen. Manscaped, 20% off, all caps.
Oh, that visual was not good. That was not a good visual. Hair in the ear.
Let's get back to some.
It's not popular with your significant other. The Weed Whacker 2.0.
Oh, man. All right, guys. We got a lot of questions, a lot more super chats we have to get to, so we're going to jump right back into them. Crawdad Corey, thank you, Crawdad. He says, is Fusi a full go for Texas? Is he the last tackle on their board? Which way are you guys leaning? Because I know he's high on Oklahoma's board.
Yeah, look, I mean, Texas loves him. There's two offensive linemen left for Texas right now. Nick Brooks, who Texas feels pretty good about, battling Georgia there, USC's third, out of Cedar Rapids. He will announce in September as of right now. We'll see if that moves up. But then there's Michael Fusi, he's going to announce a schools list, I believe, tomorrow. His announcement's going to be late August as of right now. Could that move up? Sure. Texas, Oklahoma, the two teams we're hearing most about. A&M obviously is not going away. But Texas loves Michael Fusi. They love him as a left tackle prospect. We'll see which way that goes. I think Oklahoma has resonated with him since the official visits a little bit more. But with that decision not supposed to be until August, there's a little time left for Kyle Flood and Bill Bedenbaugh to keep battling that one out.
And then our next super chat comes from Dax Kelm. He says, is Trey Moore one and done at Texas? Also, what kind of impact does Simmons have on edge this season with the depth that Texas has at that position?
I think he's one and done. I talked to his agent about 3 or 4 months ago. And while they're not, they're like everybody else. Let's see how he plays. Let's see if he's healthy, etc. I think that it's likely that he is. I mean, what does he have? 20-something sacks in his career in college football. He puts up 8 to 10 this year in the SEC. He needs to go.
Yes.
You'd love for Texas to return a double-digit sack guy another year, but let's be honest. I mean, they're playing football for a reason, and that's ultimately to make it to the NFL. As far as what impact does Colin Simmons have on edge this season with the depth Texas has at that position? Jerry, you and I have talked about this, and he's such a rare guy bending the edge. If he's ready physically, isn't that the bigger question? Like, is he going to be ready for the wear and tear of the SEC? And if he is, then do you see him getting 4 to 5 sacks this year, for example? I mean, what kind of level do you think that's going to be for him? And based on what you've heard, where is he at in that physicality process?
Yeah, I think that's still to be determined. I think he's stronger than people give him credit for. I think he's putting in the work. He's putting in the right training, whether that's strength and conditioning, technique-wise, with his people around him. Look, I'm not going to be surprised if Colin Simmons doesn't come up with 6 sacks this year. It's just not going to surprise me. Now, there's the caveat with that. You could get 2 in one of those early games in the second half of a game, a Colorado State, a UTSA, or a ULM. But I think he's going to, maybe more than sacks, it's going to be how much disruption he can cause this year. And I think it's going to be significant because he is different. He's a different level of twitch. He's a different level of BGO. He has great snap count and snap anticipation. He has length. He is a physical player. He's just got to continue growing this frame. To me, the key there is Texas had 32 sacks as a team last year. I've said that number needs to be 39-40 this year. Once you get into that area code in a 12-game type of season, then you're really disrupting. You're getting more hits on quarterbacks. You're putting teams behind the chains in key situations more. That's a key number for me. So if Texas can go to from 32 to 39 or 40, that's a pretty significant gain. And if you start looking at the teams that really contend outside of Georgia's second national title team, they didn't have quite those pass rushers that they had on their first one. That those teams were normally over 40 sacks in a season. That's a big number, and I think a key number for Texas to get to. But I think Texas can do it with Trey Moore and with Colin Simmons being added to what they already have. Barron Sorrell in year 4, which is he's kind of what he is, really good against the run, going to get opportune coverage sacks. Ethan Burke, what's he going to do year 3? It's going to be better. How much better? But really, Trey Moore, Colin Simmons, I think they're going to hold the key. And then Anthony Hill is a second-year linebacker. Blitzing is going to hold the key. I expect Texas to run more games this year up front because they're going to have to. But I think the increased edge presence is going to allow them to play more games on the defensive front. But I think Trey Moore, here's the thing I'd say about Trey Moore being one and done. If he has a productive year, let's just say he has 8.5 sacks. He needs, like Bobby said, he needs to go pro. He's not going to grow taller. His arms aren't going to get longer. He is what he is physically. So if he has a productive year, it's time to go pro.
Good for him.
Exactly. It's the way it should be. He bet on himself. He bet on himself.
Yeah. Hey, I want to bring this up before we go to the next one. People have asked the number 51 and who the best 51 is or whatever, since we're 51 days away. A lot of people will say Donald Hawkins in recent memory, who's been on this show, by the way, and now is coach, if you're unaware, is coaching some pretty elite players in the Metroplex for offensive line coaching and tutoring. He played for Stacy Searles back in the day, late part of Mac Brown's tenure. But the 51 that I'm reminded of almost immediately was a first-round draft pick for the Longhorns named Stan Thomas. He was a left tackle for the Longhorns out of Riverside, not Riverside. I think he was from I think he was from down near Imperial, down in Southern California, closer to San Diego. He was a first-round draft pick of the Bears. That's the number 51 that I remember most. Interesting if anybody else has other 51s worth mentioning in the chat as well.
Hey, Football Junkie's got a super chat we need to answer. Football Junkie, thank you for the super chat. Georgia edge linebacker. He's a 5 technique. Mikael Williams had 4.5 sacks last year, is projected as a top 5 pick by some. How's that possible? I expect him to make a pretty big jump year 2 to year 3. Very talented kid, fits the NFL profile. He's very talented. Look, if he goes and puts 40 tackles and 7 sacks on the board, he's going to be a first-round pick because he is very talented. He's going to test well, got a great frame. Obviously, here's the thing about a kid like that, too. When the NFL scouts roll through there, they're going to watch him practice against what's probably going to be the best offensive line in college football this year every day. So there's going to be a lot of things that more so than games with him that these NFL scouts are looking for. And they already saw in the spring, by the way, because Georgia's offensive line is really good.
And we were talking about, Trey Moore a minute ago, but Brian Hudson with his super chat wants to talk about a different Trey Moore. He says, Oregon is recruiting a local wide receiver product from Wise High School, Trey Moore. Why hasn't Texas made an offer, Jerry?
Yeah, I mean, look, that just comes down to who, Texas has higher on their board and who they like more. I mean, look, Adrian Wilson, talented receiver from Weiss. He's going to Arizona State. That may be who you're referencing. He was once committed to Oregon, no longer going to Arizona State. But Texas, a guy that Texas liked, evaluated. They just like some others better.
And I think I think the one that they're referring to is actually 2027.
Oh, the young kid, Trey Moore.
Yeah. So still a ways to go in that recruitment.
A long way to go.
Yeah. Hey, well, he should go ahead and commit to Oregon and see if they'll take it, the offer. If that's the case, because I'm looking at his other offers right now. Other offers are UTSA, Tulsa, UTEP, Texas State, North Texas, Lamar, Liberty, Duke, and Arizona State's the latest bigger one. But he's 2 years away.
Yeah, it's a long way.
I mean, he's only gonna be a junior, right? No, he's only gonna be a sophomore.
Yeah, he's same class as my kid.
I mean, you can't. Texas has no unless they're a freak of all freaks. Texas has no need to offer a bunch of 2027 receivers.
And by the way, it also some of those early offers are smart. Bobby was talking about Will Stein being a head coach somewhere soon. That he was probably part of that offer, being an Austin area guy, recruiting that Austin area. So smart recruiting by a guy who likely will never be the OC when a kid like that age gets close to signing day. Let's just say that.
Okay, let's see here. We got another super chat. This one from UT Boy. And thank you, UT Boy. He says, when Jonte has arguably the best hands on the team, or I think he means Jonte has arguably the best hands on the team. He may not be as fast, but his IQ and hands will answer all those questions that y'all were talking about. Tell him, Jerry Hamilton.
Look, I mean, Jonte he's a talented guy, very good route runner, smooth, clean route runner. I think he's always like when I saw him in high school, the interesting thing with Jonte was he would have some drops in high school, but I never thought it was hands as much as concentration. And I think he's improved in that area. And that happens sometimes when guys just mature, right? Guys mature mentally in the game of football at different times. And it's just kind of, I call it navigating your way, but just developing. It's not always about physical development. Some of that's mental development too, because I think he sometimes the guys are so good in high school, they get open so easily. They don't concentrate at times on the most important part. That's catching the ball over the shoulder on a deep post route. But when he's in contested situations dating back to high school, especially outside the hashes, out routes, things such as that, he always caught the ball very consistently. So I think he's continued to clean up the concentration part of his game. And I think everything will start catching up with that this year. And again, the scheme at Texas for Sark is hard for a young receiver. So I think the toughest thing for these guys, as talented as they are you thinking or are you just out there playing? And I think once you get past that point where you're locked in on the scheme, you're locked in on everything pre-snap that goes into being a receiver at Texas, once you're locked in there, you have much more freedom to just go play. And like what we saw from Isaiah Bond in the spring game, Bobby. Now, Isaiah Bond's similar to Jonte Cook. I saw him a lot in high school, Under Armour camps, whatnot. He would have those occasional drops where you're like, but I'm not sure it's a hands issue as much as it was just a concentration issue at times. So it'll be interesting. Like Isaiah Bond, first half of the spring game, his second half was much better than the first half. And is that because he drops footballs, or is it because he was just getting comfortable? He has more on his plate.
I've got to question this. I mean, does Jonte have the best hands on the team? He would not be my choice. He would not be my choice. I think that Matthew Golden
Tremendous
would probably get that one, and then I think Ryan Wingo would get it as well. Both guys a little bit longer armed too, so that contributes to that for Jonte. But I don't know. I mean, Jordan Washington, I think, has the best hands of the tight ends, from what I'm told.
There you go.
So those, and a lot of those guys are former basketball players.
Yeah, chasing rebounds in traffic.
Yep, keep that in mind. But that Jonte's hands are not a liability by any stretch. That's not. Right. I don't see that as an issue. So I'm just trying to say the very best on the team. You know, you're picking nits a little bit.
Yeah. All right, Bobby, tell folks out there one more time about Rick Vavro and Austin Underground.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick and his team at Austin Underground have specialized in difficult underground commercial installations since 2004. The team's engineering background gives Austin Underground the ability to perform work other firms often consider just too risky. Rick and his team offer an end-to-end client experience, including seamless communication, budgeting, staffing, and top-notch trade partners. And most importantly, they produce solid quality work each and every time. That's Austin Underground. Thank you for your sponsorship of every Thursday morning's Coffee and Football. Hook 'em.
We got time for just another question or two, guys. We got a couple of super chats that we need to knock out first. I'm gonna do this from UT Boy as it's a comment. Thank you, UT Boy. He says, this is from all of us. Texas is gonna destroy folks because of our line of scrimmage, our speed, and our quarterback. Hide and watch. Hook 'em. Thank you, UT Boy.
Look, I think that's what puts Texas in the conversation. Is they're solid at a lot of spots, and they're solid where you need to be solid with quarterback experience. And look, it's going to be a faster team 1 through 85 than last year. How does all that kind of melt together and come together? We'll see. But Texas is good enough up front. They're very experienced on the offensive line. They're experienced at quarterback behind the offensive line. The running backs aren't inexperienced anymore. They have experience on this team heading into next year. Gunnar Helm, a lot of experience. Their new receivers, a lot of experience. This is a very experienced team. And when you put that with SEC size, now, interior D-line guys have to prove some stuff when people run right at them, but the edges are going to be better. You put it all together, and there's a reason Texas is ranked where they are. Even as good as people think Georgia's going to be, they aren't without concern. They need another corner to step up, right? They need a couple of things to go their way as well, as far as some players stepping up. Do they have the talent? Sure. Everybody has question marks this year, but I would really like to be starting where Texas is. See if they maximize it. That's what all this comes down to, maximization and health.
And then our last super chat for today from Thogata. Hope I'm saying that right. Thank you. He says, I know the video game rankings don't always translate to on the field, but I saw that former Longhorn Logan Parr was in the top 100 for EA Sports College Football 2025. You think we could have used his help, or is this offensive line room already stacked? Hook 'em, fellas.
Logan Parr was buried. I think that they had to have someone from SMU in the top 100.
Correct.
And we'll see if he maintains that high ranking, etc. I'm not trying to be rude to Logan, but he was behind. I mean, he lost his job to Cole Hudson as a true freshman.
So where
Cole Hudson can't start at Texas right now.
Yeah.
What do you want me to say?
Yeah.
He just all of a sudden became a better player the minute he stepped on the field at SMU. Maybe SMU's offensive style makes him look better. I don't know. We'll see if he maintains that rating in a better conference.
Right. I think also the other thing is when Texas came in, they needed bigger, longer arm human beings. And Logan Parr there's about 3 or 4 guys that kind of fit that same physical mold. And Texas knew they had to get some bigger, longer arm, larger human beings, I think is a big part of that. Because Logan Parr, I agree with Bobby why he's where he is in the game. It's a marketing, right? You're trying to draw people in. But I think he maybe as far as the prospect wise may have lacked some of that arm length and some of that frame that Texas was looking for moving forward.
2 more super chat real quick. Slick Rick says, Bobby, Jerry, if y'all are ever in San Antonio, lunch on me for all the work y'all do. It's the least I can do.
I'm on it.
Can't beat that.
No doubt.
Rick. And then UT Boy with the one more super chat. Bobby Ray, no John Jay slander is tolerated. His skills and production will cause the world to spin a little bit slower. So
gotta speak the truth.
Hey Bobby, here's something we need to hit on from Odin Horns. Talk about agenda for Omni Resort, SEC Media Days, OTF, Restaurant Live, kind of what our plans are next week for SEC Media Days, because we'll all be up there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we go in on Sunday. The actual event itself begins Monday, but pre-registration's on Sunday. Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorns don't start until Wednesday. So the first couple of days, I've got the list somewhere here. I can't even remember who it is. Our other SEC teams. There are also some SEC, I don't want to say celebrities, but media members that we're going to talk to. I put in the request yesterday to talk to a handful of those guys, as well as some players and team members of other and players and coaches of other teams. Hopefully, we'll be able to get them on for coffee and football, as well as on Texas football in general. But it's going to be wall-to-wall football. We'll definitely be on every morning, same time for coffee and football. We may have and may add a couple of live feeds from things, including Steve Sarkisian. He is at the mic on Wednesday, and so we're going to try to get every word from him for sure, as well as several others.
Look, man, this is not fun how they set this up. They bring out Lane Kiffin day one to set the bar for your experience listening to coach interviews. So he's going to set a pretty high bar for everybody else from the comedic standpoint and entertainment standpoint. So that's not really fair. We don't know if Brian Kelly's going to dance. We're waiting to hear on that. The 16th, obviously, Smart Drinkwitz, Venables, Josh Heupel. Somebody should ask if those two like each other, by the way. Then Wednesday, DeBoer, Napier, Jeff Levy, Sark. And then Thursday, obviously, Sam Pittman, Hugh Freeze, Mark Stoops, and Mike Elko. Stoops and Elko back-to-back, man. That's interesting because the A&M
they passed on the tarmac?
Well, that's it. They both flew on the same plane in about a 48-hour period of time, owned by A&M people.
All right.
I wonder if Elko saw any like Kentucky gear on the plane and was like, "Can we get these back to Coach Stoops?"
They left them. Stoops brought some bourbon. He left it on the plane.
This will be the last question for today because I promised them I'd get it in. It's from a Tennessee fan. Thank you for watching us here on Texas Football. It's from Donovan, and Donovan says, "Welcome to the SEC. Go Vols. What game are y'all looking forward to besides Georgia? Because in the SEC, it's not the big game that gets you; it's the weekly grind."
Well, I would have to say, from my standpoint, Donovan, I can appreciate that you guys don't necessarily haven't followed it that closely, but Texas hasn't played Texas A&M in 13 years. There is no doubt in my mind that that's a game as well as the OU game each and every year. Beyond that, like if you take Texas, Texas A&M and OU out of the equation, Arkansas is a rivalry rekindled, but that is in, I think that's, in Fayetteville. A lot of Texas fans aren't going to be able to make it up there for that. So I'm looking at Florida. I mean, that is a national brand that's coming to DKR. And so, obviously, Georgia, you said to take that out of it, but I'd say Florida. I mean, that's probably the one for me outside of Georgia at home.
I think the last, it's so much comes down to where you're at. Are you in a playoff hunt or not, right? But after Texas kind of goes through the early gauntlet, at Michigan, obviously around the 3 non-con games, then the Oklahoma and Georgia back-to-back, then you have Vanderbilt, then you have the week off. Then you have Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, A&M, 4 games in a row to end the season. I think those games are going to be big because how beat up are you? How much of a physical toll is season taken? But there's 2 off weeks this year in college football. That's moving forward. That's a big thing for team health. But I think those last 4 games are going to be really big for Texas, to his point, because it's not the big games. You're up for the big games. What do you do in the games otherwise? So Florida limps in because of their schedule, but still a good team. Florida could go 7-5 this year and be a good team on that schedule. But if they limp in to Austin, coming off, the Oklahoma, Georgia game, then Vandy a week off, are you as up for that game as you should be? Probably. But then you have at Arkansas, then you have Kentucky, who you have to be up for Kentucky, or Kentucky can beat you. So I think that's going to be, to his point, that's what's going to be interesting. Those last 3 games of the regular season before A&M, Florida, at Arkansas, Kentucky. Emotions are going to have to be high for Texas in those games.
I want to add one more piece. We'll see exactly how much of a different grind it is between the SEC and the Big 12.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree that it's going to be a more difficult grind. Don't get me wrong. But for what is it? Is it, 25% tougher? Is it 50% tougher, or is it 10% tougher?
And as 2 off weeks during the season make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, it definitely will.
That's a good question.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Coffee and Football, presented by Rick Vavro and Austin Underground. We want to thank them for sponsoring today's show, along with Chubbies and Manscaped. Thank you all for the great questions, for the super chats. It was definitely an action-packed episode question-wise, so we appreciate all the support. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell so you're notified anytime that we post a video or go live. And then, of course, head on over to ontexasfootball.com. Become an OTF OG using promo code OTF OG. $39.95 for 1 year. Obviously, we can't be on the air 24/7. So that has you covered when we're not live. So for Bobby Burton and Jerry Hamilton, I'm Blake Monroe, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.